we as the Democratic Congress will do for our people. We've come a long way. Daar was baie trane, daar was nagte op, daar was tye waar het moeilik gegaan het met ons. Mense het ons in ons rugte gesteek. Mense het in ons gesigte gespiek. Mense het die Here in ons gesigte toegemaak. But we still here. Mense het ons geld gewaai en toe pak ons ons sakkie en sê, Baba, ek kan nie kom wees. So I'm going to go on, I'm going to hand the mic over to Mr. Enca, who is our national advisor, and he will take you guys through the manifesto. Your hands in line for Mr. Enca, our national advisor. Out with the blue! Out with the blue! Out with the blue! Out with the blue! Out with the blue!
Comrades, I'm going to be reading through the first section of the political manifesto. At some stage, fadiel will take over, and then I will end off reading through the political manifesto. When we wrote this, it was about 27 pages, but we had to reduce it for the printers, and I think it's about 11, 12 pages. And so we will make available the full copy at a later stage. So what you have in front of you is but merely the summary. We were advised that we need to issue a 4-page summary. And when I decided to do the summary, I realized you cannot reduce the problems that we face, the crisis that we face, to 4 pages. It's impossible. So I'll read through the section now. History text indicates that the Dutch East India Company established a refreshment station at what came to be known as the Cape of Good Hope. The indigenous people of the region at first welcomed these visitors to our shores and engaged in bartering and trading. When the purpose of the Dutch East India Company shifted to the establishment of settlements and occupying land, the relationship changed from trading and bartering to that of land conquest. The Dutch East India Company engaged in a war against indigenous peoples, which resulted in genocide and extermination. Today, only remnants of an indigenous culture, language, rituals remain. The struggle to reconstitute these and reclaim this heritage has begun, and it must be supported. The historical record also reflects that the Dutch colonial power was then
contemporary ways in which our bodies continue to be excluded and our voices silenced. Noting the ways in which the transgenerational trauma from land conquest, genocide, rape, murder, slavery, colonialism, and apartheid continues to negatively impact the lives of the descendants of the indigenous peoples. We therefore demand just and equitable reparations from Holland and the United Kingdom for its crimes against the indigenous peoples, including land conquest, slavery, genocide, and the theft of our mineral resources which enrich the former colonial powers. Just and equitable reparations from Afrikaner landowners for using our ancestors as slave labor, paying for labor in the form of the DOP system, condemning generations of our bodies to fetal alcohol syndrome, and for the continued payment of low wages post-1994 on land stolen from our ancestors. A new division of land in which the first priority is to ensure food security for all citizens. Just and equitable reparations from corporate South Africa that made its profits during colonialism and apartheid, and in the post-1994 democratic dispensation continues to make profits off the back of the super exploitation of all bodies in the extraction of natural resources that belongs to all the citizens of the Republic of South Africa. The right to free and compulsory education for every child from preschool to first degree. Convinced that neither the corrupt and venal ANC regime nor the main opposition party, the DA, represents the interests of the indigenous peoples. We therefore resolve to establish a political formation open to all South Africans that are hurtful of the political lies propagated by the ANC and DA, and seek to foreground policies and laws that are based on social justice rather than greed and self-interest for all South Africans. And as such, the CCC declares itself as a social democratic party with policies aimed at ensuring the implementation of an holistic plan to address the historical legacy of land conquest, slavery, colonialism, as well as addressing the consequence of continued political rule by the ANC nationally and the DA provincially. The following policies will make up the political manifesto of the Cape Colored Congress. And now I will deal with the issue of race, because many of our critics call us a racist party. This is now our answer to them. Identity. It was assumed that a post-apartheid government would scrap the racial classification system that divided the population into various racial groups, which was the basis of apartheid, racial discrimination. However, when the democratically elected government moved into political power in 1994, it retained the racial classification system. Subsequently, affirmative action and black economic empowerment policies were introduced, and liberal academics formulated reasons why these policies were necessary. At that time, no one understood the implications of these policies, least of all the people on whom this was meant to impact. Though there was dissatisfaction in colored communities, it was not articulated by any politician or political organization. To a large extent, intellectuals and so-called struggle activists accepted the explanations, partly because it was also added that these policies included everyone broadly defined as black, as was understood in popular anti-apartheid struggle terms. That was not the case, as we came to understand when these policies were implemented. With racial classification in place, affirmative action and black economic empowerment effectively excluded people classified as colored. The consequences of this political decision has been devastating. Application forms and registers require one to fill in racial group classification. For people classified as colored, this meant they were automatically excluded from opportunities ranging from jobs, promotions, economic development and social housing, particularly as the priority is a preoccupation on black, which in essence meant only indigenous Africans and not black as broadly defined in law. The same was applied in every aspect under the guise of equity and other respects. It is common knowledge amongst colored youth that applying for opportunities is a waste of time and generally demoralizing. The effect of this is colored youth resorting to gangs and drugs as alternatives and escapism from a harsh reality. Even though communities classified as colored are the most integrated and diverse group, as well as the most tolerant of all cultures, it is the most stigmatized. Therefore, saying under apartheid we were not white enough, now under democracy we are not black enough. As incorrect as it is, it holds true for the experiences of colored people in the context of a so-called democratic South Africa. Historical research has proven the colored community are the descendants of the indigenous and Khoi San people. Throughout its history, this community was involved in resistance, from the various Khoi wars to the slave rebellions, from the dock worker strikes to the hooligan riots, creating many organizations of the time, producing leaders and intellectuals in opposition to the various oppressive governments. During the anti-apartheid struggle, colored people identified as black and participated in the liberation movement, and many were incarcerated as political prisoners. Many colored people and youth were injured and killed on the streets during protest actions, and others died in police custody as a result of severe torture. These uprisings had intensified during the 1970s and culminated in the launch of the United Democratic Front in Rocklands, Witches Plain, Eldorado Park, Regen Park, Heidedal, Wentworth, Marion Ridge, Laudium, and countless other colored townships across South Africa. Together with other formations and militant student movements on the Cape Flats, they rejected the tricameral parliament that wanted to incorporate colours into the apartheid government. Coloured was an identity that was promulgated in apartheid legislation aimed at ensuring the continued exclusion and marginalization of indigenous peoples. We have now undertaken the political decision to give new political meaning to this identity.
Yes.
For the purpose of language, culture, and tradition, all of which continuously evolve, we are now being viewed as, we now view colored being our identity, both beautiful and complex, and maybe even contradictory. Coloreds are all those who are from a mixed racial background, those who are not ashamed of it, and those who publicly and privately claim to being colored. We make no apology for the use of this term. We do, however, note that what the National Party did to divide the oppressed along racial lines, the ANC continues in current legislation, thus establishing a hierarchy of oppression. The objective result of the policies of affirmative action and BEE has not been its stated aim, that is, to benefit all previous
obviously disadvantage South Africans. Rather, these policies have been used to divide the oppressed along racialized identities which were long rejected in the anti-apartheid struggle. The result is that colored people are not seen as black. For the few available jobs in the continued racially segregated capitalist labor market, these policies dictate that the oppressed fight amongst themselves for the available jobs at the low end of the labor market. We therefore propose a campaign that will demand of national government to scrap the racial classification register with the immediate effect, with no distinctions or gradations of blackness. All sections of the oppressed must have equal access to jobs, housing and education and health services. I'm now going to give over to the President of the Cape Colored Congress to read through the rest of the political manifesto.
Thank you there to our national advisor. Okay, we're just going to call up Beggar G, if he's in the house. He's a rapper, guys. Your hands are mine for Beggar G. And then we'll hand over to our president.
Colored style.
Hy sê dis van die Bybelsuit.
Goeiedag se mense. As Beggar G strijd van die Bybelsuit hoor, wat my nie ken nie, my regte naam is Devin. Strijd van die Bybel en vandag, vir my is dit 'n groot voorreg om hier by julle te wees vandag. Ek wil maar net dankie sê wat ek dien, wat vir my gesê het om te kom vandag, wat vir my ge-encourage het om te kom vandag. En so kom ek maar net vir julle baie dankie sê. En ek is hier vandag, ek wil maar net vir julle sê, ek is hier. Hoor, ek gaan iets klein met julle deel vandag. Ek het nog nie 'n beat saam gebring nie, maar oké, ek gaan vir julle het gee vandag, hoor. Ek gaan vir julle sê waaroor het gaan. So die enige wat ek nou saam met julle gaan doen, as ene sy naam is, maak gebruik van jou tyd. Verstaan? So as baie mense wat kansen kry in die lewe, wat die gebruik maak van hulle tyd nie. Sy het jou eerste kans gekry, sy het 'n tweede kans gekry, sommige van hulle het derde kans gekry in die lewe. So wat ek vir julle kan sê is, maak my net gebruik van julle tyd. Verstaan julle my nou? Verstaan julle my? Hoor is hier? As Beggar G hoor, so ons gaan so begin. Ek sê het was 'n tyd. Jou eerste kans moet dit gryp, so maak gebruik. Jou tweede kans moet dit aangryp, dit was 'n tyd. Maar jou derde kans moet jy vaskyk. En die mense wys dat sy al jou drome in die lewe bereik, dit was 'n tyd. Ek sê die mense het ons skak ryk, ons college kry swaar, en die wit mense skak ryk. Hoe dan sê dat ons college gaat daarmee nog vastkyk, die lankie, ons klein kinders het iemand geveel uit. En as elke naweek dit gesê, elke naweek hou de pleks, dit gesê, ons hulle mekaar sy image op in my node pleks. Hulle soef van 'n pos af gesê, die polisie het hulle opgesluit. Buite sê jy man, maar binne ek is soos 'n meid. Ek het die regte ding gekies, dis hoekom mense na my opkyk. As klein kinders aan 5 jaar voor in die tronk erop gesluit. Maar ek gaan gewys dat ek al my drome in die lewe bereik. En as jy my vir beter laat die maak, jy grootste mistake, dit was 'n tyd. Jou eerste kans moet dit gryp, so maak gebruik. Jou tweede kans moet dit aangryp, dit was 'n tyd. Maar jou derde kans moet jy vaskyk. En die mense wys dat jy al die drome in die lewe bereik. Hoor op. As klein laities op die aarde, die op na hulle ouers kyk, want hy sê sy alle ouers wie ook hulle kinders gebruik. Hulle is klein bo op die straat by mekaar nog om 'n kroon te kyk, dat gesê, moeiligheid, maar poorse het hem opgesluit. Hulle het 'n klomp drugs binne in sy sak gekry. Ek die rapping kom hier en hier wil ek op bly. My hart is hier, my hart is hier, my naam is Beggar G, en ek neem mekaar met 'n legacy. So het was 'n tyd, jou eerste kans. Sy moet dit gryp. Verstaan julle nou mense wat ek nou vir julle gegee het? Yes. Ek tel hier. Daai nou met sien. As so in 'n boek. Wat hoor hier? Ek het nog een vir julle. Dans met die duiwel. Sy sal dans met die dood. Ek wil julle moet hoor. Ek wil net julle moet hoor. Ek het nou net die iets aangebring vir julle vandag nie hoor. Wat is hier nog een vir julle? So as hy dans met die duiwel, sy sal dans met die dood. Dans met die duivel, sy sal dans met die dood. As sy dans met die duivel, sal dans met die dood. Dans met die duivel, sy sal dans met die dood. Ons mense word behandel soos 'n klompie slawe. Die vandag gelyke word begrawe in my agterjate. So wie die kapen, gebruik ek my tong as my wapen. Ek gaan op die weervlieg, ek staan vas, die soldaten. Ek het op die buurt gekom, en nou vlieg ek aan soos 'n arend. Ek los die reppers onderpijn, ek smeer hulle uit met voltaren. Ek bring het in mekaar, soos my naam is stoeltrein vast, weer my naad en garen. Die sal ek voor nabring, hy sal onder die jaken, wat ring onder die laken. Napen in die aanden, praat het van my muziek binnen my slapen. Iemand binnen my gapen, dat ek is so kapen. So wie sê wat gaat ek maken, as ek jou vang in my achterjaken. So dans met die duivel, sy sal dans met die dood. As jou linkerhand op die Bybel en jou rechterhand op die lood. Soos jou keuse is in die lewe en dood. Van koppe word afgekap en lyke word gegooi in die vloed. So maak dinge recht met jou koning, soos hy gaan in jou woning. As my beloning en jou verskoning. Die reppers is kerstasies en ek is die kragtoring. Ek maak vrede as torings, ek gryp in die Bybelse horings. En ek doe die reppers soos koring. So as hy dans met die duivel, sy sal dans met die dood. Baie dankie mense, baie dankie. As ek mense, as ek, nie waar nie. Hulle gaan binnenkort hoor van my, binnenkort. Baie enjoy your day for me. Your hands in mine for dignity. Ladies and gentlemen, your hands in mine for our party president, Mr. Fadiel.
On the issue of housing,
the CCC says the state has failed dismally to provide adequate social housing. This is evident in the mushrooming of backyard dwellers as well as the growing database and a fictional waiting list. The right to housing is a universal right and rightfully should be enshrined in our Constitution as the bare minimum. The Constitution only refers to the right of access to housing based on available resources. This is a provisional right which is dependent on available resources. For poor and low-income families, this means being condemned to live in the backyard, paying exorbitant rents to greedy landlords. Living in this form of inadequate accommodation has become a generational curse, leading to all kinds of problems as a result of overcrowding. Added strain on resources by economic migrants and local labor has further complicated this housing crisis, resulting in urban sprawl and escalating the cost of housing. The housing crisis is to be fixed by 1. The housing crisis is characterized by 1. The failure by local government to build new rental stock. 2. The failure to implement the people's housing process. 3. To provide plots for first-time homeowners. 4. The stopping of self-help schemes. 5. Construction of bad quality social housing. 6. Delays in housing projects and incomplete housing projects. 7. The unspent housing budgets and corruption by housing officials. 8. Bypassing people long on the housing waiting list. 9. Poor and inadequate town planning, especially spatial planning for human settlements. The Cape Coloured Congress commits to 1. The full implementation of the people's housing process and self-help schemes. 2. Emergency housing for all backyard dwellers on the housing. 3. The building of affordable rental units in all communities. 4. Fast-tracking of all current and new housing projects. 5. The establishment of housing cooperatives in all communities supported by both local and national government. 6. Establishment of a state-owned construction company for the purpose of solving the housing crisis. 7. The reconstruction of townships that are still dysfunctional as a result of apartheid spatial planning and forced removals. 8. The shortening of the waiting period to receive social housing. We need a new housing policy where housing is considered a human right and not an expense limited by austerity measures. In line with this policy, the CCC demands that the establishment of a state-owned construction company with the sole purpose of eradicating the housing backlog. Hundreds of thousands of jobs must be created to ensure the building of these houses, the maintenance of these houses, the building of extra schools, public holidays, and thus the redesign of apartheid spatial planning for the whole of the country. A 20-year mass public works program and infrastructural plan that will ensure rural communities and townships will be turned into garden villages and eco-friendly suburbs. The Boekap and Woodstock. The CCC notes the continued gentrification of Boekap and Woodstock, areas in which the majority of residents are descendants of the indigenous peoples. The impact of gentrification is such that residents are forced to sell their properties as they can no longer afford the rents and the rent charged by the DA-controlled city of Cape Town, irrevocably changing the demographic of the area. The CCC commits to halting this gentrification process once we assume political power in the city of Cape Town and to restore the dignity to these communities. District 6. The DA-controlled city of Cape Town continues the delays in the return of this land to the original inhabitants. Many elderly people have passed on, waiting in vain to return to the places from which they were forcibly evicted through the Group Areas Act. Most of this land is now occupied by Cape Peninsula University of Technology and Business and frequented by the elite only. The CCC-controlled city of Cape Town will immediately start the process of officially renaming the area District 6. Take over the CPTU campus and convert the building for housing purposes. Land claimants must have first access to housing, parks must be built, and the area must be turned into an eco-suburb. The CCC, the Group Areas Act. KZN, excuse me. You have to work with me, guys. My eyes are terrible. KwaZulu-Natal, Gauteng, Northern Cape, Eastern Cape. Wentworth, Marion Ridge, Sydenham, Woodlands, Newlands Estate, Eshowe, Richards Bay, Newcastle, Empangeni, Ladysmith, Kokstad, Harding, Sisonke District, Eldorado Park, East London, Port Elizabeth. The DA-controlled wards across these territories are plagued with gang violence, drug and substance abuse, domestic violence, and general degradation. We as the CCC will fight for the dignity of all South Africans, but in the main the dignity of the people of South Africa most affected by the drastic change of living condition in the aforementioned areas. Health. South Africa has a two-tier health system, one for the rich and one for the poor. Most public hospitals are in a state of disrepair, underfunded, and the abuse of patients is woefully systemic. We demand the immediate introduction of the National Health Insurance Scheme in all private and public centres under state control that will guarantee free access to health care at the point of care. All medical professionals are to be fully funded by the state, and the state to pay for medical schemes, for medical services and skills. All public hospitals and clinics in urban areas are to be fully funded. All government officials and their offspring are to use public health care facilities. A more aggressive training model for nurses on public health care. We demand new public hospitals and clinics to be built by the state in rural areas up to international standards in quality of care and easy access. Public transportation. All forms of public transportation are in a dismal state. Metro rail is nearly totally dysfunctional. Buses serves only a section of the population, and taxis are the most convenient but unsafe. This is a complete contrast to a MyCity transportation system that allows easy access for the middle and upper class. We need an integrated public transport system paid for by the state that is safe and easy to use, easily accessible, and it must be affordable. Metro rail, the bus companies, the taxi industry must be brought under state control to ensure that the workers can get to the places of work in the safest, most efficient, and cheapest way possible. The right to a living wage. The right to work at a living wage must be enshrined in a constitutional amendment. With decent work at a decent wage, we will have dignity, and people will be able to provide for the basic needs such as health, food, shelter, clothing, and education. Colored communities face extremely high levels of unemployment. The situation is I had my Jacob Zuma moment. The situation is exacerbated by economic migrants from other provinces and as well as foreign nationals. The astronomical escalation of the cost of living impacts heavily, with many unable to afford basic necessities such as food. The shutting down of the textile industry in Cape Town by the Minister of Public Enterprises, Ibrahim Patel, had disastrous consequences for coloured families in general and coloured women in particular. The impact of these policies are mostly felt in women-headed households where women are the sole breadwinner. The textile industry was also the main industry in Cape Town for decades and the entry point for many young women into the formal economy. Policies such as affirmative action renders coloured people unemployable, leaving coloured youth demoralized as they have little chance of finding employment anywhere in the public or private sector. Many of us have resorted to gangs and drugs as alternative forms of escapism. The casualization of labour creates uncertainty and keeps us at low levels of income, leaving many of us at the mercy of labour brokers. An extended public works program provides only temporary relief for a short period at below minimum wage and seldom translates into any formal employment. The Cape Coloured Congress commits to, number 1, the scrapping of affirmative action policies and the establishment of employment policies that provide work for all. The appointment of staff based on local demographics as a minimum in local and government private sector. The extending of EPWP jobs over longer term and the progressive development of people in terms of skills and competencies to a full qualification and a permanent job at a living wage. 4. The launch of a mass public works program to solve the housing crisis and other needs employing local people only. 5. Creating local infrastructure to ensure local people are employed in the rendering of services to local challenges and needs in communities. 6. Most importantly, we demand an end to the casualization of labor. Guys, I broke my specs a few months ago. The whole screen has become a blur. With your permission, can I ask AK to finish? Thank you.
I think this is probably the most emotional topic for any one of us sitting in this hall today, in this community of born people, and all apartheid and the denial of its traumatic generational impact will no longer be tolerated. Most men are in fact toxic and perpetrators of crime, ranging from rape to murder. Social services meant to deal with crime and violence are inadequate and underfunded. Whereas the middle class and the rich have access to private security companies, barbed wire, CCTV, electrified fencing and private insurance, working class communities remain defenseless. Men are both the victims and perpetrators of crime. The gang war in impoverished areas must be brought to an end through a comprehensive state-led intervention. The state must be forced to make SACs available to secure the lives of the citizens of South Africa at all costs. And we will no longer accept the fact that most of these agencies protect tourist areas and CBD. Likewise, we will, in consultation with affected communities, develop community safety plans, and we will hold the national government to account to ensure the full implementation and monitoring of such community safety plans. You may very well ask, what is our view as the CCC on community safety? The CCC will campaign for the gangs and drug merchants to be declared as terrorists. In law, the gangs and drug merchants must be disarmed by the law enforcement agencies. Gang leaders and drug merchants must be jailed in military prisons. Under 24-hour lockdown, in solitary confinement with no access to parole. The CCC will campaign for the limited reinstatement of the death penalty for premeditated murder and rape related to the war on terror, as well as economic crimes committed against the citizens of South Africa.
Okay guys, that was enca, our national advisor, and our president fadiel sharing with you or giving more info on the manifesto. Are you guys ready?
I'm ready, bro.
There we go. Okay, we've got another singer, Darren Peterson, that will render an item for us. Guys, while they're preparing him off, ek het nou gekyk hierso en ek sê vir myself, wie kom allemaal son? As hier niemand wat die son lees nie. Wie lees die son? Okay, doesn't matter. You know, this is a good event for us as a people. The son is here. We've invited all the media today. They're not here because it's maar net nog colours en it's maar net Cape Colour Congress hierso. But as hier 'n slegte storie gebeur het, dan was hulle almal hier gewees vandag.
Wow! Sjoe, ek het hoendervleis. Ek weet nie wat in kakkie is en of wat rainbow chicken is, maar ek het hoendervleis. Anyway, guys, before I forget, but before we do this, before we go on Nigel, our national father from Nigel, before we go on our national campaign manager, mense, ek was vir jaar, ek like happy birthday sing. So, before we made the 2 mense vir jaar, so if it was your birthday, from the 1st of June, right up until today, if it was your birthday, I want you to quickly line up here. If you're on the outside, quickly come line up here. If it was your birthday from the 1st till the 9th. What's it like? today's the 16th, sorry, the 9th. Quickly, it was a birthday. That includes our president and Mr. Enca, if they can please rise. They go for my birthday, listen. If you could just stand there. Paul Police Branch. Denise, Dr. Denise's birthday. Anybody else? Come guys, quick. Let the one come now, if it was a birthday. Now we're going to wait for what the branch is, your name. We just played, if you guys. If it was a birthday, quickly, because now. Okay guys, and we ask Mr. Enca. Okay, we put on the president to rise to his feet, and we also rise to our feet, and we want to sing. Mr. President, if you can please rise to your feet. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to the president. Happy birthday to you. Hip hip hip. There we go. Nog een piep. En Afrikaans. My piep en dat wil jullie veilen. Dat die jullie zullen in op bijna staan. Hip hip hip. Mr. Nigel.
Thank you. Honorable President, the Honorable AG, members of the Provincial Executive Committee, members of the Regional Executive Committee, as well as the general members, I want to say thank you very much for attending this gathering, which is very historical in 2021, on a very historical day as well. Ladies and gentlemen, we've heard the briefing of our manifesto today, which is a stepping stone towards our election campaign for 2021. I wish to extend our greatest support for all the members in general from the various respective branches to take this manifesto, take this message out to our voters, and please give a clear indication to all our voters as the manifesto is indicating to us or guides us to say to them, guys, ladies and gentlemen, our community, those leaders, give the message in telling them that there is much more in our communities that can unite us than that which divides us. Thank you very much.
Thanks to our national campaign manager. Okay, we have come to an end. Yeah, that's what I think. So I'm going to call on the president of the party to do the closing speech. And guys, we've prepared something for you. That's anything what likes van Triple C. Hulle likes eat. Dis net die party, but hulle wil net eat. So we prepared for you guys something small. And I think after the president, I'm just going to call on Stacey just for a word of thanks. So, yeah, so I'm going to call on the president just to say something, and then I'll call on Stacey. Guys, ek het nie pragtig wat ek gesien het.
Kan ons weer nou terug? He doesn't want to go forward in his suit. He doesn't like it.
Brian is just in. Brian, can you hear me? hear me?
Mr. President. You must speak up, Mr. President.
Can you guys hear me outside? Yeah. Chief seats? Hello, can you hear me outside? Thank you guys for coming out. Thank you to a very small handful of people for putting this together. You know, when we started Gatful Cape Townian, it was because colored people are truly Gatful. We ran for 3 years. We looked for a political party to join. No one ticked the boxes. No one ticked the boxes because no one was willing to speak about the colored issue. The colored issue is A, we have nowhere to go. It is B, our communities are flooded with drugs. It is C, our children have low life expectancies. It is D, we cannot get our children into schools. It is E, a colored man in this country has no dignity because he cannot find a formal job. He is emasculated. He is not the head of his own home. We looked, we spoke, we asked. No political party was willing to take on this challenge. No one. We looked at ourselves. We said it is time for colored people to back themselves. We will not hand our future to anyone else. We formed the CCC. We planted a seed. It grew into a tree. Today we are a forest. Yeah. Thank you. We were told at 4 o'clock yesterday that we would not have this war. I told my people we are going in. At 9 o'clock this morning I was on the phone with a certain ward councillor who I will not mention. I said to him, if I launch on the street today, you got trouble. 10 minutes later the war was open. Thank you guys. Ladies, gentlemen, I am proud to say that there are more women in this party than men. I am proud to say that we are developing young women to lead this party. Because where I live, women work the budgets. Where I live, women have the final say. And so shall it be in the CCC. We saw today unbelievable talent on the stage. I mean, I heard people sing today and my hair is still standing up. And it's that type of talent that they would see die. It is that kind of talent that we need to thrive. We need to feed it. We need to nurture it. And I'll tell you something else. The kind of talent you saw today is not a rare thing where we live. There's 1,000 kids that can sing like that. But many of them are in prison. Many of them are in the gangs. Many of them are dead. The CCC is the only policy that says enough is enough. You know, we must be unashamed to say that the unnatural act of a parent burying a child happens only in our communities. We must ask the question, why has government never asked this question? How do we stop it? The answer is simple. Give our children opportunities. Empty these ghettos and things will come right. Guys, until we get to council, until we send pit bulls to council, not the kind of poodles that represent the colours right now. I'm not talking about your Khawatim and your Joe Woodman. We're talking about proper voters. People that will get up in council and say, no, we will not approve this. Nothing will change for us. I refuse to have decisions for my children to be made from Constantia. I don't care what the color of the resident in Constantia is. That day will come when we will live under the shadows of Table Mountain again. I swear to you it will. That day will come when you walk into a police station or a law enforcement officer and 50% of the people working there look like you. You know, when you live in a backyard, you have nothing to leave your children. When you die, your children will become backyarders. It will become a generational thing. We are asking for land. We attempt to take land. They shoot us off it. But our cousins from elsewhere can come and erect entire villages and nothing gets done. These people are landowners in 2 provinces, and the original owners of this land own nothing, and we are told to shut up. I got news for John Steenhuisen. I got news for Cyril Ramaphosa. The colored man will no longer keep quiet. We won't shut up. People, you know, some of you are like family to me. I'll make you this promise. If we keep doing what we do, there's nothing that can stop us.
Yes!
As we stand here today, they are watching us. They are scared because they know that what we did to them in Delft is going to happen to them anyway. They know that the fight for total fairness, for total equality, for full representation, it has only just begun. Thank you, CCC.
Just to say a word, is this a word to say? Mensen, ik ga een beetje Afrikaans praten. Wij staan hier op Afrikaners, mensen wat Afrikaans praten, en een beetje Engels was van die kap. Zo mensen, is er niet zo. Ons het hier ding wat ons het maaien. Na hierdie, laatste van hierdie, dan gaan het uit mensen. Ons gaan uit, ons wordt gesiektes, ons wordt lastig is. Ons gaan niet stoppen mensen, want ons is een boesie, en ons is een boesie met de waarheid mensen. En dat is wat we zeggen. Uit met de blauw!
Uit met de blauw!
Uit met de blauw!
Uit met de blauw!
Terrorlos!
Met de!
Terrorlos!
Met de!
Terrorlos!
Met de!
Uit met de blauw!
Uit met de blauw!
Maar we spelen dat trappen zo lang. Okay, I believe that Mr. M.P. Palmer, the guy that wrote the platform song, apparently he's on his way here. So we will hand out the food and Maggie's with the format. And while we're having our thingy that he's going to perform, I'm going to call on Stacey from our provincial team to just do a word of thanks.
Before I'm going to do the word of thanks, it was also asked for me to just say a few words to the ladies, the women of the CCC. Ladies, thank you for standing behind this party 100%. Without us, this party would be possible. The men can say what they want to say, but us, as a group of the party, okay. On a serious note, thank you very much for everybody. everybody that came out, for every single person that contributed, for helping with the hall, the sound guy, the food, the decorations, the entertainment, our president, everybody attending, and the cake. Also, because of you, we are the Cape Colored Congress. Thank you.
Okay, I just have a vehicle that needs to move. There's no lock and I can't give you the registration number. See if something, please don't see if something. Can I just get the number, the registration number to park iemand in? Okay guys, I think we all need to rise to our feet. This